fantastic on what the heck is this? Is a Wednesday morning? It's been a little while since I've been live on the internet. Um, Not that I think there's a whole lot of people watching, waiting for me to jump on a live stream anytime, but here's the deal. Some of you reach out and you say, hey, I haven't seen you post in a while and whatnot. I'm going to edit this because if you're on Facebook, you have not been able to see this yet because of the way that Riverside does its thing. But now we are live publicly on Facebook. Some people should be notified in some way, shape, or form. I'm just going to talk like there's a whole million people in front of me, and we're going to have some fun. So here's the deal. I always seem to feel like I need to have a point to come on and do these. I guess I've spent enough of my career coaching people or being behind a camera in front of an audience, and I feel like there's some things to say. And I've always tiptoed, and probably will continue to. I've always tiptoed on getting too far into mainstream issues, and there have been times, no doubt, there have been times where I have argued, and I've been one of those people on the internet for a day, right? Like it's, maybe I've had in the past, some arguments extend a couple days or something, but I decided that it really wasn't all that useful to continue doing. And there's a lot of it happening right now. I mean, there kind of always is, but I'm seeing some things happen that I thought I would talk about. And I think it plays into a bigger, more personal thing for everybody as well. And certainly I run the risk of some people being, I'm being a little dramatic with the word outraged, right? With things that I'm going to say, because I don't think anybody's actually going to be outraged in that way. It's more of a, well, you'll understand when I talk about it, right? Like we have these certain triggers. So I kind of titled this, The Subtle Balance Between Grace and Outrage. And here's the deal. I think all of us would say to anybody that asked or challenged us on it or anything that we're a good person. And really, it's a strange thing because who's to say that that's not true, right? We have this whole justice system that's supposed to help with that and whatnot, and that's not perfect in many ways, but what is a good person? And if you've been around me for long enough, you know that I often talk about getting rid of polarizing language as much as possible. It's hard to do. It's still something that I maybe don't take seriously enough, but I still think it's an important thing. But I think everybody would prefer to be seen as somebody who does what they believe is right? And I remember there was a scene in Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't remember which one, but I remember when I seen it. It was years and years ago. I was quite a bit younger, and I was just exploring a lot of personal development and stuff. And there was a line in there that says, "A person only does what they think is right." And I think that that's often the case. I think that's the only way that somebody can move through life, right? How do you confidently move through life if you don't think you're right? As you grow older and more mature, you start to realize that maybe you're not right, but you can navigate that gracefully, right? Well, this subtle balance of grace and outrage is often in our own experience. Sort of the center point of that is based on our own perception of us doing what we think is right. Now, because lots of people have lots of different ideas of what is right, that whole balance moves along. And I'm oversimplifying a bit here. There's some more complexities to this, but I want to talk about how it actually pertains to you, not just the world and the culture and whatnot, but I do want to give you some cultural examples of things. So right now, I have a friend online and somebody that I've talked to numerous times that's amazing, a great person, nothing but wonderful things to say about them, but they have a position, and I'm not here to debate this position necessarily, but they have a position that everything that's going on in the White House and Trump and everything is just racist, right? And there's because of a sense of rightness around that, the balance between grace and outrage has shifted to a place where like outrage is the only option, right? Because it's so violating to the personal senses. But what that ends up doing when we lose balance on outrage, and I'm not here to judge them for their position. It's not like I'm happy with whatever position somebody wants to take. Where it gets a little murky for people is when we start to do those things and we lean too far into the outrage, we lose a sense of grace. And when we lose a sense of grace, we have this tendency to want to really justify. Now, grace allows things to be different than yourself, allows things to exist wonderfully apart from your own preferences, right? Outrage, which is maybe not the right word for it. It's a little, salacious and dramatic, but it's outrage is this place where you're completely committed to your idea apart from anything else, right? And there's dangers in that, right? I know other people that are in the totally opposite positions, right? They're so far into the grace that it causes a situation where maybe there should be a little more outrage, right? If we're talking in lines of like balancing of mechanisms within themselves, right? I know somebody else right now that is that's like so hardcore in the opposite spectrum that they can't even consider that there could be anything like racism going on, right? And this happens all the time. This isn't new to any of you. You guys know people that fit any number of these buckets in different categories, of course, outside of racism and whatever. But here's my point. When we bring this down personal, apart from these cultural issues, we have to live our lives. And we can only live our lives as confidently as we can live our lives. And if we need to be right, if we need to be justified, we actually we cut ourselves off from something that is bigger and more important, and that's perspective. Now, when we get justified in our perspective, it's because of a couple of different things. We're either we either have blind faith in the idea, right? And sometimes I mean blind faith in the sense that the person is so committed to it that they're just following another tribal mindset, and they just have faith in that, and they just go, that's what's true, therefore it's true, right? When there's a whole other perspective that invalidates that truth. Culturally, this is huge right now. I mean, we have this gigantic divide in this, to the point where people are like, they identify as a political party. I want you to just think about that for a minute, right? Identifying as a political party is such a tribal thing to do, and I'm not judging it. I'm not here to tell you you're wrong for it or anything. I've done it at certain points in my life. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of what's the effect. And when we choose to align our identity with these different ideals, and we choose to make our righteousness around these things, we run the risk of limiting perspectives that are important. And when we can't actually consider those perspectives within ourselves, mostly, but culturally on top of that, we really have a situation where you have two people of opposing views that both demand that they're right. And by two people, I mean, extrapolate that into society, right? Two groups, two ideals, two nations, two whatever. They are certain that they are justifiably right, and the subtle balance of grace and outrage is shifted so far to outrage that grace can't exist. And if grace cannot exist, if it truly can't be brought up, because the second you bring it up, somebody says, well, what about the injustice? If it can't be entertained that we have to have grace to navigate complex situations with ourselves in our own lives, if we can't give ourselves that grace, some of us are very hard on ourselves. I've been very hard on myself for many, many years in my life. And I go through periods where I realize how limiting that has been, right? A sense of grace opens up a lot of other things. I have another friend right now that is just certain, because one thing didn't happen, that it must mean that this whole, the thing that we're working on is falling apart, whatever. And it's like, it's such a microcosm to make a decision. And there's so many other factors that we can just go, grace allows for another perspective. And if we allow for that other perspective, we offset this outrage. And I think where I'm really getting at with talking about any of this, what really is sort of like bringing this up for me, is that I feel like for an awful lot of things that are happening on social media, an awful lot of people in the world and opinions, there is a sense of this balance point moving a little too close to outrage. and there's groups of people, and there's this massive media machine that just feeds this, right? Like, and it is expert level, a world class, master class on population manipulation, right? You guys know that I'm a nut for psychology, and like, listen, this mass media machine is absolutely diabolical, and it feeds on all sides and all fronts, and we're all subjected to it at some level, some way, shape, or form. But here's the deal. I kind of talked earlier about these senses of right and wrong and these polarizing opinions in language and what that does. What those do is every time we say something is definitively good or bad or right or wrong or just or unjust, we section that line a little further from grace. Because when we're definitive on something, we're 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 commanding that world to exist for us, right? And that's our viewpoint. That's how we're going to see the world. Of well, of course that's how they are. They're a Republican, or of course that's how they are. They're a Democrat, right? Like, no, they're a human being, right? They're a human being, and they're dealing with a whole slew of things coming at them as well. And whether they're definitively right or wrong on a subject is something to figure out. But how we figure it out? Do we figure it out through condemnation and absolute destruction, or do we figure it out through a gentler, more graceful way that helps inform somebody? You know, there's a great guy. His name's Daryl. Man, is it Daryl Davis? Might be Daryl Davis. He is a blues player, and he's a musician, and he's most famous for going around the country and collecting robes of KKK members. This is the black guy who's grew up in the South. I forget what state, but blues player, ridiculously good, amazing human. And you know what he does? He goes up to people that are devout KKK members, and he has a conversation with them. He doesn't demonize them. He doesn't make them somehow the enemy. Rather, he sits down and talks to them, and they go, well, yeah, I don't like black people, which of course is a ludicrous thing to say. You have to be in a very limited perspective to say something as sort of definitive as that, right? It's moronic. But it's also something that happens to people. And you know why it happens? Because they get into ecospheres that define right and wrong and cause a sense of justice and injustice around these ideas. That's how that's how sort of malleable the human consciousness is, right? Well, this guy goes and sits with these people, and he goes, well, I'm black. You don't know me, so how could you say that you don't like me? And he just has a nice conversation. And large percentage, like 90+% of these people that he's talked to, have given him their robes saying, thank you for freeing me from that. Right? Now, if that man didn't have the subtle balance of grace and outrage in check, what would that be? That would just, like, that could spill into war really quickly because of these ideals. So here's what I'm going to say, and this is where, like, I'm trumping the whole thing with this, is we can identify as a group. We can say, hey, we're part of a race, we're part of a culture, we're part of a movement, we're part of a political party, we're part of a gender, we're part of all of these different things. And some of those things can be definitively true. But it doesn't mean that's who we are. Because the other thing that we are for sure is human. And I don't mean that is sort of like soft and fluffy as it could be. I mean that as a matter of fact, right? Like, we don't have to look at other humans through those lenses of these other identities. Those are just things that they're entertaining for the moment, right? It's not who they are in that sense. And guess what? Some of these people that are humans, you're going to disagree with, and you're going to not want to be around. And that's just okay and part of the game too. It doesn't mean they have to be demonized in the whole game that's being played, right? So I don't know. It was on my mind today, and I know I probably spent more time on the culture side of this than I wanted to, but I do mean this from a personal level. This is ours to manage. Grace is a beautiful thing, and if you let grace open your mind a little bit to different perspectives and different outcomes, and you quit using. And I don't want to say it like you're wrong for using it. I'm just saying if you do, stop using these ideas of these definitive groups that dictate right and wrong. You know, this is racist. This is evil. This is, you know, because this person is this, it must mean they are that. And listen, I'm human too. I've done it. I'm not here preaching from some, you know, ivory tower. But it doesn't mean that we can't be reminded that grace is a beautiful thing, and that it, you know, these things that we get caught up in, and where we place our outrage, it's maybe not all that valuable of a thing to be doing, and not all that valuable to put there, and even worse, it risks being highly inaccurate in a game that could have benefited you in a wonderful way had you had a little bit more grace. I don't know what that means. Like, it's personal for everybody. I'm just saying that grace opens that door and outrage tends to close it. So find that subtle balance within yourself, within within an ideal, a topic, you know, a particular cultural, what would be the right word for it? Particular cultural, pop culture, popular, whatever is popular culture right now, right? And politics seems to be a big one for pop culture right now. So, anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. I appreciate you guys watching. We'll talk to you soon.